Mere Conservatism.
Mere Conservatism. I like the way that sounds. You know, all credit, the musical theme that you hear on Mere Conservatism was actually composed by none other than David Perry, as I recall. Now, maybe I got it wrong.
Well, that's the band that I was in,
band, yeah.
and so me and my band, that music is actually me playing bass guitar, and I composed. I did write my part for it. Everybody wrote their part for it, but yeah, Mayberry.
Yeah,
Mayberry is the name of the group.
Well, I got to give you credit because you came up with the whole concept. This is Mere Conservatism. I'm Cleve Walker, and again, I always say this, and I'll just say it again. I'm always surprised that there's something else that happens. Another shoe has dropped that we need to talk about. I guess I keep expecting this thing to plateau. The thing is, what's going on under the regime, I keep thinking, okay, it's going to plateau at some point. It hasn't.
Did you see that Biden got his booster?
Yeah. Well, of course, rumor mill is one
that
thing.
He didn't actually get it?
Well, some were saying that was a saline solution. I've been hearing. And again, I actually think he got it. But
yeah, I think he probably did.
But as soon as I say that, there's a part of me that realizes I can't put anything past these people as far as what they will do to present a narrative and how they will lie. So as far as I know, he got it. Okay.
When it comes to the boosters, though, do you think it's kind of odd that they've got a booster out that you have to get, and it's only been like 6 or 7 months since you got the first?
I think it's very odd. I think it's
what kind of vaccine does that?
I think it's an admission. Because they were promising, I think, the potency of this vaccine being a whole lot stronger and more longer lasting than apparently what it is. So it's an admission that the science is changing on the vaccine. It is.
And also, can I just say that I feel like this kind of thing vindicates people who wait. Mm-hmm. So you'll have a lot of people that when something new comes out, whether it's a product, a vaccine, anything, they wait. They wait for Gen 2 because Gen 1 is going to have all the kinks and all the weird things in it, and then they work that out, and then the subsequent products are better.
Especially because this was expedited. Let's understand this again. This was expedited.
And a lot of people decided to wait on the vaccine. Yeah. And look, I think the vaccine is kind of a miracle. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but I do think that it's strange that you already have to have a booster. And it doesn't. I don't even know if it's right to call it a vaccine. Would you say at this point it's more of a treatment? Because, and the reason I say that is because it's not keeping people from getting COVID. It's just keeping it from being as severe.
Now you're bringing up a point there. I don't know that it necessarily makes it a therapy or a treatment, but you are bringing up a point that there are more breakthrough infections than what they were leading us to believe there would be.
Yeah.
Their thing is, of course, that it's a milder
which is good. That's good.
But again, that sounds more like a treatment than a vaccine. But they say the same thing about the flu vaccine, that you take it, whether or not it helps, it at least keeps you from getting the worst symptoms. All I know is that, again, the science on it has changed. So if that can change, perhaps as we go down the road, we'll see some other things they thought were true about it that are not true about it, too. It's possible. So let's start with that vaccine because beginning this past Friday, David, people all around the country, places and agencies all around the country have some deadlines that are expiring about the mandate. For example, in Denver, police officers who refuse to get the vaccine as of this past Friday will be fired. We're fired. And the officers did file a challenge, but it was not an administrative complaint, so it didn't qualify, something like that. The mandate also covers workers employed by private businesses and organizations, including people who work in healthcare, and many nurses and even some doctors, but mostly nurses, are calling it quits.
That's in Denver?
Not just in Denver, now around the country.
Well, we're seeing, I know that there was a big story in New York where a bunch of lots and lots, was it something like a third?
It was a bunch. I don't know the exact figure.
Number.
It was significant.
Of people, healthcare workers that were refusing the vaccine and were going to be let go. And the governor decided to bring in the National Guard to fill their slot, which, by the way, the National Guard has a different vaccine deadline. They don't have to be vaccinated yet. So it's kind of funny that a lot of them are not going to be.
That you're going to bring some unvaccinated people to replace the unvaccinated people.
And another thing, this is another argument that I've heard that I think is actually a pretty good point and kind of funny, is that these are frontline healthcare workers who've been on the front lines of the COVID battle. Mm-hmm. If you want to call it, put it in those terms, for over a year, not having been vaccinated. They worked for almost a year. Yeah. Actually, about a full year on COVID.
You're describing my daughter
without
who's a nurse.
being vaccinated. And they worked with COVID people and all that stuff. And they were hailed as heroes and never were vaccinated. And now
they're villains.
They're villains. Now they have to be vaccinated. It is kind of strange.
It is more than that to me. It is surreal. It is astounding. Okay.
And in the midst of all this, they're saying there's a shortage of nurses. Their hospitals were overwhelmed. How can you say and complain and worry that your hospitals are overwhelmed and also be able to let go of a third of your nurses?
Well, you talked about the governor of New York saying, basically we're going to bring in some other, we're going to bring the National Guard. But some states are thinking about importing nurses from places like the Philippines, of all things, to stem the shortfall. It's kind of crazy. Do we not understand what's happening here? Okay, this is not science that's guiding this decision. This is not science. You've had nurses, and again, I have a daughter who's a nurse. She's actually had COVID and has the antibodies, by the way, and has been on the front line for some time, and she doesn't want to take the vaccine. So what she's done, she has left the hospital where she was at, and now she has gone into telemedicine, because that's a burgeoning business right now.
So healthcare for phones.
Yes. No, of course, the telemedicine industry, of course, is totally different. You don't have to have physical contact with your clients and patients, except on a very limited basis. Many are choosing to go that route.
Let me ask about your daughter. Did she have the alternative to get tested weekly?
In her hospital, I don't think that was offered.
Because I can understand, I suppose, in these scenarios of them wanting to be very careful about people with COVID caring for others who also have COVID, which is weird, because if you have COVID and you're caring for somebody with COVID, done that anyway. But can't they just make an exception? If you don't want the vaccine, you could just take a test. We'll give you a rapid test once a week when you come in. Shouldn't that be a kind of compromise that I think some are reaching that.
I think some are reaching that compromise. The problem there is, and I was looking on Facebook. I have a friend who has that arrangement. Her thing is, though, she's responsible for the expense of all the tests. Okay, and
she's got to pay for it every week.
Right. So it's not something they're providing for. You just got to submit the results. So you are responsible for that. So either way, I guess what I'm trying to say, if you're not vaccinated, they will penalize you in one way or the other. You're going to be segregated, stigmatized, or whatever, even if you're allowed to continue to work in some capacity. That's awful.
It's not great. It's not great.
And again, you and I are not saying, hey, don't take the vaccine, okay? I have chosen not to, but I'm not telling anybody else, and I don't necessarily want anybody else to feel that way. But if you don't see whatever side of the issue you're on, pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine, if you don't see the mandate is the threat, that the idea of the mandate is the thing that so many of us are saying, hey, we got to stop this. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Well, does the federal government have a right and to impose this, and do other places have a right to impose this?
Yeah. Well, and they don't. We have had a problem with our government from the very beginning of this whole pandemic with our national healthcare bureaucracy and all that stuff, and that is zero humility.
Oh my goodness.
We talked about this for over a year, where if they would just say, we don't know, we would like to take these precautions, we think this is the best thing to do, but there's a lot we don't know, that would be nice. There's a trust deficit, and the reason is because the government has been so dogmatic and so sure about things that they have been very wrong about. And they've been shown to be wrong over and over again, or they've been proven to have been pulling rules out of their rear end and implementing them in the nation, like the 6-foot rule, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Never, not once, have you heard them make a point to say, we're really not sure. We need to take extra precautions because they don't do that. And so when it comes to this vaccine, they're doing the same thing. Even when rules change, even when you now have to have a booster, even when several months ago, Joe Biden was saying, get the vaccine and go back to normal. He finally did say that, take off the mask and all that stuff. And now things have changed. They're way too sure. They're arrogant.
Yeah.
They need a little bit of humility when they deal with people because the only other option is tyranny. The only other option is that steel fist.
You make a very good point because I remember when Biden was first announcing the plan and his intention of going to the mandate, he said statements like, we've been very patient, but our patience is running out. And I remember thinking at that minute, I wish Biden had that same attitude when he was dealing with the Taliban and terrorists and those who are legitimate enemies of our nation. I wish he'd had that same attitude towards them as he's addressing towards Americans over the issue of the vaccine. Mm-hmm. I mean, did you see that? We are running out of patience. Why did you talk to the Taliban and the terrorists and those who are flooding our borders? Why did you talk to them, these un-American people, these terrorists? Talk to them in that attitude. Don't talk to American citizens
and
without
by the way,
some measure of humility.
Somebody says to America, where our patience is running thin, you just lost a lot of people.
Yes.
Because we're not hearing that from you.
No, good point. And so everything they're doing is, I think, wrong, and the way they're doing it is even wronger.
It's really bad. Again, a little humility goes a long way when you're trying to lead people or trying to get people to do something that is good for them.
Yeah, one of the complaints about Trump when he was president is he's not humble enough. He doesn't show enough humility. I'll tell you what, looking at this administration, I think Trump showed a whole lot more deference, at least, to the American citizen than these guys have ever done since they've been in power.
Yeah.
I really believe that. Now, speaking of lack of humility, 3 top defense officials in the Biden administration testified this past week in Congress in 2 separate hearings on the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. One of them was Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who told the House Armed Services Committee that he supports the president's decision to withdraw, while the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and he's commander and also commander of U.S. Central Command, Ken McKenzie, both said they told the president that they thought 2,500 troops should have been left on the ground in Afghanistan. So, David, here's what I'm saying here. If they told him that, then what does that mean when Biden tells the reporter, hey, no one told me that. And he did add that strange caveat. I don't recall anybody telling me that. Okay.
No, he
what's the import of that to me? They're saying he gave him advice. We got to leave some troops in there. And he chose to say he didn't get that advice.
Well, the I don't recall thing is a politician answer to say,
I don't want to go on record.
To cover themselves, but I don't want you to be able to accuse me of lying. So you can't know whether or not he recalls. I think actually it's very likely that he doesn't recall anything past maybe this morning, past his Metamucil that he had. So that could very well be true. These guys, they did everything they could do not to throw President Biden under the bus during this, but they couldn't. They couldn't help because the questions were good,
right,
and they were pointed. And they had to answer the questions honestly, and so it came out that Biden was told that this was a bad idea. Milley said directly addressed leaving Bagram Air Base and those kinds of things, which I found a little hard to believe exactly some of the things that he was saying. However, the choice is the president's. So let me ask you. They were following his orders whether or not they thought it was a good idea, apparently.
So let me ask you. They told him, and I believe they told him, and I also believe he remembered that they told him, okay, I really believe despite his mental issues, Biden did get this input from his military brass. So my question to you is, why do you feel that he said no to their input and chose instead to make this precipitous withdrawal? Why would he do that, given that the fact they were telling him, hey, to do this thing safely, we're going to have at least 2,500, troops from back? Why the no from Biden?
Well, I think the biggest reason is because he's extremely incompetent.
Okay.
I think that he actually thought that it would be a political win for him to get the troops out. And that was the most important thing, for troops not to be there. That was
especially by 9/11.
That was his biggest thing. It wasn't even close to 9/11 when he pulled him out. I think that he is very incompetent, and I think that he had one thing on his mind, which was, it's a political win for me to get troops out of Afghanistan, as if this is not why we have troops, to do things like this, to be there. By the way, our military is not here, that we don't have them to stay safe at home in bunk beds or whatever. We have them to deploy all over the country for American interests. It was wrong to pull them out when he did, if you were going to do it at all. I just think that he is really bad at this. And he thought that it was gonna be good for him politically to be able to say the troops are out.
Now, and let me say this: I think you make a very good point. I think I would add only one caveat. I think that the powers that be, the ones that are pulling his strings, also told him, we want an immediate withdrawal. In other words, I think Schumer and Pelosi and folks like that, they wanted a quick one too. Now, this means that Biden and those guys literally believed that they could trust the Taliban to help them make this expeditious withdrawal. That they were given assurances by the Taliban, because the Taliban said, "Hey, you can keep, you can keep the embassy open. You can do whatever like this." And they said, we know we're going to go ahead because we can trust you. And
or they thought that the Afghanistan government was going to hold up long enough for them to get out, which is also possible. However, you're also incompetent if you don't change your plan when you see immediately that is not happening.
Yeah. Yes.
It became obvious fairly quickly that wasn't the case. They did end up having to bring some troops back in to Kabul. So it's just they're just really, really bad at this. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing you can say, I think.
Well, it gets worse, though. Here's my point, and I'm bringing this up now not only because they gave the testimony that showed that somebody lied, and in this case, I think it's the president, as far as who heard what, who said what, but I think we should never forget that right now, at this moment, as you and I are talking, there are Americans in Afghanistan who have been left there, okay? And we should never forget that. They are still there under dire circumstances because of the decision of an American president. So, to me, we're
going to have to pay what amounts to a ransom to get them out.
And that's already been demanded. And you're right. And the point being is, don't be surprised if at some point we hear stories coming out, the true stories coming out of what is happening right now to those Afghanistans and to the Afghanistan allies, those who helped us, and to the Americans who are left there. We're going to hear some terrible things, because the Taliban is more than just a terrorist situation. They are just a malevolently evil group.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, so just tossing it out there. And again, wow, what a difference a president make. We had one president who was demanding respect of our enemies and would obtain that respect. And we got another one now who speaks authoritatively to Americans who are not vaccinated, but does whatever the Taliban and apparently other countries like China want him to do.
Speaking of China, do you know if Milley called the Taliban and told them, "Hey, if we strike you, I'll let you know first that we're going to do that"?
That might be a good question. All right, I would have asked that question.
He did ask. He was asked about his call to China a little bit during this. I believe. What was he not?
Yes, he was. I forget who asked it.
And so it's a good question as to why he apparently was so in lockstep with Biden here, but with Trump, he was really out of step. It's not good. Milley really can't. He really should not keep doing the job that he's got right now. He's got to go.
He should be gone. Agreed. And I didn't want to go any further because he makes me so mad to even think about somebody in the military who has just that much lack of respect for the Constitution that he would do something like that. Anyway, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin was answering questions about the proposed $3.5 trillion. I don't even want to say that. Golly. And actually, it's more than that.
Well, it's going to cost zero, though. You know that.
According to Pelosi.
It's $3.5 trillion budget
will cost
deal,
nothing.
But it costs zero. As the president said, Cleve, the cost is zero.
The taxes ink all that out. I mean, hey, this is not... Anyway, it's actually going to cost more than $3.5 trillion by all accounts. But anyway, Manchin says he does not want to see any kind of like new system being built around the country through all this money. He says he wants to see the price lowered, but however, he has not named a specific price. So I want to go on record to say this. $1 trillion would be way too much. So I don't know what's going to be shaved off this, but I guarantee you it won't be significantly enough. You know, the only good thing about this is that the squad and that crowd and the Sanders crowd, you know, I'm now hopefully trusting that they won't get what they want, which they want this whole thing.
Yeah, well, there's a problem for Democrats, which is that Biden has lost a lot of his political power.
Yeah.
Because of his mishandling of pretty much everything. Yeah. And there's infighting with the Democrats, mostly between Manchin and also Kristen Sinema of Arizona. They're not too interested in spending like crazy. The Republicans, for their part, aren't. They probably help the Democrats more than they should, but they're holding on to the debt ceiling thing a little bit, saying, you know, you got to have a better plan for spending before we do this. So I have hope that none of this gets through at all because there's so much infighting and nobody can agree. I really hope that none of it happens. And let me rewind just a second to the way politicians talk about the spending, which has been a thorn in my side for a decade at least, when they talk about taxes and then when they talk about things that cost money. Biden and Pelosi are such disgusting liars when they talk about how this costs zero.
Right, of course.
And it is a terrible lie. It is the exact kind of thing that people hate politicians for. Did you know, Cleve, that if you have a mortgage and your mortgage is $1,500 and you also make $1,500 a month at your job, that your house is free? That's what they're saying. They're saying
that's a great example.
They're saying
that's a great example
because it zeroes out, supposedly, because it zeroes out that it costs nothing. So in their brain, what they're saying is that the only things that cost something are deficits. Yeah. It's such a lie, and it's such an abuse of language and how people understand things. They know that they are manipulating people when they say this actually costs zero. That they've decided, hey, this is a good way to say this. Obviously, it's not really true, but we can make it true if we define things in certain ways in our own heads. We define things certain ways, and then when we say things out loud, we'll just say it costs zero. And they're misleading, manipulating. They're lying to people, and it's disgusting. This is why politicians are terrible.
That's so well put. The only thing I would add to this $3.5 trillion, which in actuality is actually more, close to $5 trillion, that is the cost of doing something that Schumer said we were going to do. Namely, he said we're going to remake the nation. This is the cost of turning America into a socialist country, because this money will literally be used for the government to overwhelm and overtake every aspect of our country, and that's socialism. So this is what it costs. They want us to be a socialist nation, not a capitalist nation, despite what Biden says. So this is how much money it's going to take for the government literally to buy up everything and literally have what they want. And that's what's so disgusting and so scary to me.
Yeah, and the monetary policy coming out of this administration of the government right now is just terrible. Inflation is bad.
You heard about the changes
money
with the IRS and banking. You heard about that, right? The fact that the transactions as small as $600 that a bank that you make with your bank will have to be reported to the IRS. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally, that's what I'm saying. That's socialism.
Yes,
okay,
it's a regulation that is meant to restrict your freedom to buy and sell. It's also going to be an issue for banks to have to process this kind of, because it adds layers of regulation that they have to do every time any money is moved.
But mostly it affects the smaller banks.
Yes,
exactly. The banks in your area. Mm-hmm. So this, to me, local banks and like that, they may go the way of the dinosaur.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be a problem for Bank of America,
the big ones,
or Wells Fargo.
Yeah,
but it'll be a problem for your credit union or something like that.
The corporate banks and corporations themselves that are already in partnership with this mammoth government takeover, they'll be fine. Okay, but again, anything that's closer to the community that impacts your local area and state, they're going to be hurt by this big time.
And Cleve, the monetary policy and the economic policy of this administration is driving shortages. It's shortages in labor and goods. There's all kinds of things that me and my wife typically buy we can't find.
Yes, you're not by yourself.
Have you had to have anybody come over to your house and do any work lately? It's hard to find somebody that isn't pushed out months because there's a labor shortage. I'm talking about even having somebody cut the grass.
Yep.
It's hard to get. Well,
anybody who's going into a restaurant has seen that.
Yes.
You've seen that right now.
Up and down the line, there are shortages, and it's driven in large part by what this government is doing. And I don't want to get used to that.
You just took the words out of my mouth. That's what they're counting on. They're counting on you to accept that as the new normal. Because if they can get you to accept that, they won the battle. And David, I hate to say this, there are a lot of folks who are willing to accept that, who are willing to believe, oh, that's just a new normal. We can't expect anything to be different. Socialist governments work that way.
Yeah.
So, wow, you brought up an excellent
really
point.
Bad monetary policy. Hopefully, I really hope this thing doesn't go through and that we see basically a lame duck president from here on, because we really need Joe Biden to stop doing things.
All right. So if you never voted before, hey, you got to vote now. This is it.
Yeah, we got about a year before the next election, before the midterms, and we need to make sure that we get the right result.
Got to. David, again, this discussion is available on demand.
Check it out at Apple Podcast, or you can find us on Facebook or on YouTube.
That's for Mere Conservatism. And of course, listen to this broadcast next week. We'd love to see you that way as well. For Mere Conservatism, that's David Perry, and I'm Cleve Walker, reminding you, don't get used to this. Don't let this be the new normal that you accept. Otherwise, have a great day.